So Dr. Hendrickson is still having some problems logging on, but we're going to go ahead and get things started, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve that problem as the live stream continues. So this is the celebration of the most recent volume of Colorism Essays and Poems that recently came out in 2018, October 1st of 2018. And this is actually the first live stream of 2. So the next one will be Sunday, the 18th. So make sure you come back for that one, because there will be additional writers that were not able to be on this call, on the call on Sunday as well. So even if you're watching now, check out Sunday's broadcast if you can as well. So today you're going to hear from some of the authors. They're going to be reading their works. We're going to talk about their writing. We're going to talk about colorism in general. And you as audience members will get to ask questions and make comments or share your own personal stories if you have them via the comment section. And before we get started, I want to give some shout outs and some thanks and for all the people over the past 5 years who have helped to make the Colorism Healing Writing Contest possible. So that includes, of course, all the contestants. It also includes judges, some financial sponsors, people who design the cover art and that sort of thing. And then everyone who took any action of any kind. So even if you shared a post on Facebook or told your friend about the book, it all has meant a lot to me and a lot to the writers who participated in the contest and who've been published. And it means a lot to the cause, right? The cause of ending colorism around the world. So some of you I can call by name, and I'm going to do that now. So judges over the past several years have been Opal Palmer-Adisa, Sharon G. Flake, Kalita Rawls, Jeffrey Ann Wilder, Kiara Lee, Alejandra Torres, Amaris Wilson, Benjamin Washington, and Donnie Rose. Cover artists have been Camille Hoffman, Tony Point, and Alicia Fields, Antoine Ghost Mitchell. I've had copy editors, Kevin Whiteley, Zakia Gallen, and Grace Liu. And then I've had some financial sponsors in the past, including Susan Weinstein, Tony Point, Flora Point, Valentine's Bridal in Baton Rouge, Muriel Long, Janice Ledette, Jandel Crutchfield. And so I just want to give a special thanks to all of you. So what is the Colorism Contest? Why does it exist? Well, let's start off with what is colorism, because I can't assume that everyone watching is familiar with that term. So colorism is bias or discrimination based on color, so not race. A lot of times, especially in the US at least, we equate color with race. So we say, oh, I appreciate people of all colors, when really we mean we appreciate people of all races or ethnicities. But it's possible to be the same race, such as Black or African American, and have very different skin colors, like the actual pigmentation. So colorism is not about your race, but it's about the actual pigment of your skin, the actual lightness or darkness of your skin. It also includes hair texture, right? So we know people, especially people of color, can have different hair textures even if they're the same race. It could be eye color, the shape of your nose, and that sort of thing. So that's a bias or a prejudice based on those features that we have come to associate with certain races, right? So like my complexion is a very dark brown, and we typically associate that more with African Americans. We wouldn't really associate someone my color as being labeled white as a race. So that's what colorism is. I have experienced it throughout my life, and I started a blog to share some of my experiences, something that did not exist when I was younger. So it started as a blog in 2013. And then for those of you who are familiar with websites and things like that, you can see what people are searching for when they find your site. And I found that a lot of people were searching for poetry about colorism. So I looked around online, and I couldn't really find any poems about colorism that were easy to find and that were free and accessible. So that birthed the idea of the Colorism Healing Writing Contest. I figured, hey, if there isn't anything online that people can read related to colorism, why not generate some poems about colorism? So fast forward to 2018, we've had 4 different contests. We've reached people around the world in different countries. We've had close to 1,000 submissions, people of different races and different skin tones, different complexions, and people who have different experiences and vantage points. And it's by far, so there are other things I do in my Colorism Healing Initiative, but I think the writing contest is one of my favorites. And so who am I? So you might not know me. Hi, everyone. So I can't see the names and things of that nature of people who are watching. But if you don't know me, I am Sarah Webb, and I founded Colorism Healing in 2013. I am an English professor. That is my profession. That is my day job at the University of Illinois. Here in Springfield, I am a recent transplant to the Midwest, originally from Louisiana. And so I primarily identify as a writer and a writing teacher. So it was a very natural fit for me to use writing and literacy and reading and books to address this issue that was important to me. And so that is my story right now. So Stephanie, since you are the first one on the call, are you okay with starting things off in terms of reading and that sort of thing?
Sure. What would you like me to share first?
Okay. Well, I'm going to read your bio, the one that's featured in the back of the book.
Okay.
And then you can read all or a portion of what you submitted. You can tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, anything that's not included in the bio.
Sure.
It's really up to you, especially since Dr. Hendrickson is not on the call right now. So the floor is yours for the next few minutes. And while you talk, I'm going to see if I can bring her on as well. Okay.
Okay.
So for those of you who are watching, this is Stephanie Brown. Stephanie Brown is a practicing artist of Jamaican descent, born and raised in sunny South Florida. It's funny because outside where I am, it's snowy and icy. It's my first experience in real winter. So lucky you. Stephanie is on a mission to create contemplative works in relation to colorism and Black representation. So a woman after my own heart. Stephanie, you can say more or you can just launch into your reading. That is up to you. What you have
Okay. Welcome to any and all who are watching. I will share how I met you, Sarah, because you were quite a godsend. I've moved around quite a bit. So as you read in my bio, I'm from South Florida. I was the last of 5, and I was the only one to leave Florida for school. So I've been to Georgia. I worked overseas, came back to Florida, and then I found myself in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in a graduate program there. And I started this work on colorism 2 years ago. And it was from Google searching that I found your website. And what drew me to your website is that it had the most complex and varied description of colorism, and then resources too. So it wasn't just like a hit and go on colorism. It was so much more than that. And thankfully you had an Instagram, and I'm all about Instagram. So I started following you, and I have no idea at what point it is that you end up following me back, but it's been great to see as my research progressed on just the topic of colorism, and everything that you were posting. I just really felt like I was able to feed off of that as well. And it definitely, colorism is something that will never go away, but it's also a global issue. And it's something that people across the globe can tap into and respond to and understand, whether they know the word or not. Western cultures were very big on naming things and coining things. So it's exciting to have dialogue about this, and just broaden the understanding of it. So I will hop in. The piece that I wrote, I guess it's kind of in the beginning, middle of the book. The piece is called Transcendental Shame. And this work actually started off as, it's a poem, and the poem is actually an artist statement. That's how it started. After undergrad, I've got a background in photography, and photography for me has always been the basis in how I see and how I visualize the world. But as my artwork progressed, I started moving into installation art and sculptural elements, and really just using photography as a tool along the way. And I had just created a body of work where I started to envision, what would it look like if I could change my skin? And I don't mean bleaching, and I don't mean like spray tan or anything like that, but literally, if in our society, if skin color was costume, and the way that its skin color has been used as costume. So long story short, I created a body of work around that. And I wanted to create an artist statement for it. And I had already gotten into the trend where writing has always been a part of me, but I never dabbled strictly into writing. And creating poetry pieces as artist statements has been a way for me to keep writing a part of me, and a part of my process. So I will go ahead and share. All right. Transcendental shame. I used to wish I was white. I'm ashamed I rejected myself. I'm ashamed I thought I was right. I'm ashamed I thought I could pass. I am ashamed. Skin bleaching causes cancer. Cutting myself heals black. I didn't want those blue eyes. I didn't want that pale skin. I wanted something I could not even find. I used to wish my hair could fall flat. I'm ashamed I ran from the rain. I'm ashamed I burned my hair straight. I'm ashamed I wasn't enough. I'm ashamed I didn't like me. One day, my puff didn't puff. I had finally had enough. I loved the rain and wanted to play, and to do so, I sacrificed myself. Drenched every curl on my head, saturated the life back into them. Resurrected from the hands of death, my crown floats in the wind, has the strength of silk, smells like the greatest Egyptian perfume you could have ever dreamed up yourself. My hair is my pride. Samson, I feel you, brother. Short, medium, or long, I rock them all with no help of scissors. Volume is the greatest gift, and shrinkage is my friend. You should be mesmerized. I'm stunned myself.
Thank you. So I'm going to applaud you. And I'm going to assume that the viewers are applauding as well. Thank you for sharing that poem. So I know some people might not have seen the beginning. So that was Stephanie Brown reading her poem, Transcendental Shame. And we are going to be joined by at least one more reader, hopefully. And Bobby Simmons has just joined, which I'm really happy about. Technical difficulties are always a thing when you're dealing with live technology, especially. So, Bobby, how are you?
I am great. I love that poem. That's so reminding me of my own. I love it. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're ready, but what I'm doing is I'm reading each author's bio, and then I'm giving you the floor to either add to that, to say more about who you are, what you've written, and then you can either read all of your writing or just a portion of your writing. That is up to you. So if you're ready, I can pull up your bio, introduce you to the audience, and then you can take it away.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So Bobby J. Simmons is an educator. Yes. I love teachers. With a plethora of writing experience and education leadership. She has been Teacher of the Year, Who's Who Among America's Teachers, Mentor of the Year, and a member of the Honor Society. She also resides in Florida with her magnificent husband.
Yes.
So thank you for joining us, Bobby, and you now have the mic.
Thank you so much for giving me this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. For giving me this opportunity. This was my first time at writing a poem, and I was just so elated when I got the feedback that I had won. I had been the author's pick. I just blew my mind. I always wanted to have a piece published, and this was that catalyst I needed in order to put me where I need to be, because now I'm writing my first book. And
Yes.
it's a spinoff of my poem. So I'm in the process of that, and I'm just so excited right now. My book is called Deja Vu, Second Chance, and it spins off from the poem that I wrote about hair, like the young lady that just read hers. It's so inducive of what mine is about as well. And I have been teaching for almost 30 years now.
Oh, wow.
I teach middle school children, and they're just so dear and precious. I just left them about an hour ago, and I am worn out because the Thanksgiving break, and of course they're wired up. But I love what I do. I really love writing. I love teaching writing. I love seeing my children develop pieces on their own. I had a student to have her work. She wrote a memoir and she had it published.
Wow.
So I was really, really proud of that fact. So I love writing. I love reading. And I just really, really thank you guys for this opportunity to let me get this first piece out there and, just give me that, what I needed to move forward.
Well, it's an honor to be a part of your story in that way as one of your first places to be published. And I'm excited to see where you take your writing from here.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to read just a little piece. I'm not going to read it all because it is a little lengthy, but mine is called Black Cotton. And it is, I'm actually talking about hair, just as the young lady there did. And I started out, from the roots of my head sprang strands of gorgeous hair, natural, kinky, called together, not straight and flat to the glare. Years of growth without being tamed by the world's cultural norms. Black cotton has no shame and knows only her claim against conformity. The top of the crowns of my many light and dark, young and old, so many different textures, glorious, magnificent, natural, and bold. Black cotton sat in many churches with the joy of stairs, but entered classes, restaurants, movie theaters, and held back tears. Years before, when my ancestors labored and picked cotton fields of white cotton, one never knew black cotton from their roots would never be forgotten. And that's just a little snippet of it. It goes on and on to describe how I feel as far as that magnificentness of the hair. And in my classes now, I really see a lot of girls that are moving toward that. And that makes me feel so proud that they're taking away the weaves and letting their natural hair enrich who they are. And they come in and they have this beautiful, whatever the texture may be, their hair is so beautiful. And that to me, because when I started wearing my hair naturally, I used to perm it all the time and all of these things. So I started doing that. And when I see little girls embrace that, that is like one of the most magnificent things in the world to me right now, to see that they are embracing who they truly are.
All right. Thank you. And I'm sure that part of them being able to embrace that is having role models like yourself in their lives. Absolutely. Getting to see other beautiful Black women being proud of their hair and just who they are and their heritage, where they came from.
Yes.
And like you said, acknowledging the past is really important as well. So yes, we need to celebrate teachers like you who are in the classroom, especially for our young Black kids who don't always get to see themselves represented.
Yes.
As Stephanie was saying, part of her research is about representation for Black individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So for now, we still have one caller that's trying to get on. I don't know. So Bobby, you had trouble getting on earlier. Was there a trick that you used?
I went to my email and there was a link there.
Okay, so the link just worked for you. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll get it to work for our third caller.
If it's their first time.
But we're going to go into Q&A and discussion. So I have some questions, right? But I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So the two of you can ask questions or, just interject comments as you see fit. Then, of course, the audience can ask questions as well. There aren't any currently audience questions now, but audience members, as you think of things or as you want to leave comments that I can read out loud on the broadcast, feel free to type those in as you see fit. But my first question for each of you is if you can explain why it was important for you to write about colorism and to share it publicly, which is the goal of the contest, right? Is to get a collective of voices to write about this specific issue and then to share it with the larger public. So why was it important for you to participate? And I know some of you kind of already addressed that in your opening remarks, but if you can give us a little more detail and background on that. And whoever wants to start.
Well, for me, growing up, I'm 60 years old. So growing up in the South, you saw it, it was just blatantly in your face all the time that you just was not as good. Your skin's too dark, your hair's too this, you do that. So it was a real thing for me, something that I personally experienced. And that was when I saw the contest, it was just like, okay, I really want to get my thoughts and feelings out there. So I was standing in the kitchen one morning, and this poem, I wrote it in a day because it just came to me, and I'm thinking, okay, I started jotting things down as I'm fixing breakfast. I get to work and I write a little bit more. But it was so real to me, and that's why I could relate to what your plight is in this and the things that I had personally gone through in my personal life growing up in the South.
Yes. And growing up in the South, did you feel like, so you said you observed it, did you feel like you could actually speak about it even though you saw it?
Yes. When you're saying speak about it, you mean speak about it in that particular era or speak about it?
Particular era. So at the time that it was happening when you were a child?
No, that was not that platform that you could do that. You were to pretty much stay in your place, as the old folks would say. You didn't get that opportunity. You had to, because when I write in my book, I write about the fact that Bree Breeze is my character in my book. She has this hair, and her moms make her sit in front of the stove every 2 weeks to go to church. She straightens her hair, and Bree hates it with a passion. So it wasn't anything you could say about it. You just had to go with the flow, or else we knew what would happen. So no, there was not a platform there that you could express yourself. We have that platform now, and we can give it to others so that they can embrace and enjoy that skin that they're in.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. I also remember the high comb. So the high comb has been around for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stephanie, what about you?
I think the easiest way to answer the question is sharing it publicly. Was really drawn by, I was always making art and sharing art publicly, but as my artwork developed, it became more personal. And for me, colorism was not something that was easy to talk about before because I didn't have a way of describing it. I don't think I had the language for it. And I can look back now and identify plenty of moments, but I didn't have the language at the time to describe what that meant or how it felt. To me, at first, it was all about, I need to do XYZ to fit in. I need to do XYZ so that my aunts don't look at me crazy. I need to do XYZ so that my mom, thinks I look appropriate to leave the house. And all of those pressures to do what other people wanted. And it doesn't help the fact that I wasn't seeing myself represented on television or in the doctor's office flipping through magazines or anything like that. So when I was in a position to look back on my experiences and describe them and to even pen them down, to describe them, to elaborate on them, to share them by way of writing or artwork, I just felt there's certain types of knowledge I feel that it's selfish to keep it to yourself when you know that sharing it can benefit someone else. because not knowing how other people feel is what keeps us in these separate bubbles. And sharing it is just one step to encouraging conversation, to even bringing it about. You know, anybody and everyone could describe a situation where they might have encountered colorism, but do they have the language for it, or do they even have an opportunity or a situation to describe it? So for me, writing this poem and even having the opportunity to share it by way of your anthology is incredible, because I think it's a first step. You know, anybody that comes across this book, it's more than that. It's strong writing. You know, it's more than that. Every single author is a testimony, is a witness. And anybody reading this book and coming across these poems that you're collecting and sharing publicly, you know, you're just encouraging them to come out and speak. You're encouraging them to be aware of it. And when you're aware of these things are easier to change. You can't change something that you're not aware of. You know, you can't call something out you're not aware of. So all of these things, I just feel like they're great first steps.
Absolutely. I definitely appreciate all of you like lending your voices publicly. And so for me, the contest was definitely a ploy, right? So people sometimes might have something to say, kind of like what Bobby was saying, but you need a nudge. You kind of need that push, right? And so I said, well, if it's a contest with some cash money at the end, that might tip the scale for some people to say, you know what, I think we're going to finally put that thing in writing and submit it. But I also know, like as a writer, for some people, the being published in and of itself is enough. So even the people who didn't win a cash prize, I remember, and even now that I've been published a few times, it still feels good to share your work and to share your writing. So that is, for me, is one of, on my end of things, as someone whose writing is not in the book, it is equally fulfilling to put forth someone else's work. I'm wondering if you can talk, Bobby, a little bit more about the role of schools as an environment, and Stephanie too, like because you have been a student in schools before, the role of the school environment and school culture, whether it be middle school, university campuses. We could think about the history of, Black sororities and that sort of thing. How that environment can sometimes perpetuate colorism, but also how change agents can create change in environments to address the issue, whether it be from the perspective of a student or a parent of a student or a teacher or an educator.
I love what Stephanie said as far as creating that dialogue. That is so important that you understand, because a lot of people, and myself as well, hearing the word colorism, they don't know what that actually means. They equate it to racism, and it's not what it is. So understanding and getting that dialogue created in any environment is very vital to people understanding and being more conscious of what maybe someone has gone through, dealing with this at some point in their life. Colorism. So they don't know what that actually means. They equate it to racism. There's feedback on it. So understanding.
Yeah, I apologize.
Okay.
Dr. Hendrickson, glad you could make it. We're in the middle of answering a question about colorism in schools. And so Bobby was just talking about the issue of creating dialogue and the fact that a lot of people, when they hear the term colorism, they don't necessarily know what it means. So, sorry for the interruption, Bobby, but you can continue.
That's okay. I just think, like, I was agreeing with Stephanie at her point there about creating that dialogue. It is so important in whatever environment, whether it's middle school, elementary school, college, whatever. We have to understand and be more conscientious of people and our plight in this. We can't just push it under the cover or not talk about it. There has to be, at some point in time, we create that dialogue, create those organizations or whatever that will help students understand these types of environments and what is expected of them in it. Because the worst thing to me is for other students of color to demean students of color. I just think that's really, really derogatory. We have to uplift each other, but I hear it so much in the middle school, and I correct it. I don't let it go unwarranted. We have to correct those behaviors and let students know this is not the way that we do things. But that's just my thought, and we have to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, as Stephanie said, when we recognize it, then we can change it. You can't change anything if it's not there. You have to recognize that there is a problem there, and then we can work on changing it.
All right.
Making it better.
Thank you for those thoughts from a highly experienced educator. But I want to open the floor to the other two callers. And then once we wrap up this question, Dr. Hendrickson, we can get to your bio and let you read a little bit.
I'm so sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for allowing me to come in.
Of course. Yeah, so if either of you want to throw in some additional thoughts on that question.
I'll hop in. I think schools definitely perpetuate the behavior. I think there's also lots of situations where you can perpetuate colorism and not necessarily be aware of it. And a lot of it is us just mirroring, like I said, we have so many subtle influences from the media, from television, and now internet, that we can, our preferences are subtly influenced by those things as well. So the friends that you choose to make at school, how you compliment someone or don't compliment someone, all of those things are influenced. So it's very easy, I think, for youth, period, to just kind of judge and comment and can honestly hurt each other and not even know. I've got stories after stories. I was that girl with really big hair. I'm the last of 5 and I'm the 3rd girl in my family. And for some reason, my mom did something different with me. So my older sisters had perms and I never did. I never had one. Straightening my hair was obviously always a thing, but growing up in South Florida, straight hair doesn't last with humidity. So it's always some type of fuzzy ball, no matter what you do to it. So I mean, from like, I had kids throwing pencils into my afro because they thought it was funny that it would just, it wouldn't fall out like other people's hair. They could throw it from a distance and it'll just stay in my hair. And that was fun to them. And, at the moment and at the time, it just seems like someone's just picking on you, but I wasn't necessarily equating that with my Blackness, right? I wasn't necessarily equating that with colorism, of course. I didn't have those terms. But it does ostracize you. It does separate you. It does make you feel different. And any characteristic that you have where you are a minority or you feel different, it's going to eat at your self-esteem. And if you don't have someone else in your life or your family or your home or at school encouraging you and encouraging your differences and, telling you to be proud of those things and love those things, then you're going to look for ways to hide it or to change it. So it's great to have educators like you, Bobby, and more teachers and principals and just people in positions of power and authority, showcasing, rock your wraps, rock your braids, rock, just encouraging your individualism, because you are sending subtle messages to every child you walk by or speak to and meet, whether you know them or not. Just they're going to see you owning yourself. And I think that's the most powerful thing we can do.
I love that.
That too, yes.
If anyone is on Twitter right now, they're gonna see. You said they're gonna see you owning yourself, right? And then that will allow them, give them permission to rock their own individuality as well. So I'm excited about where this conversation has been headed so far, but I'm also excited to back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Now that we have an additional caller on.
Yay.
I think there were a couple of writers who were signed up who are not going to be able to join us, but that's okay because there's plenty to talk about. And then with 3 people on the call, the conversation can take different trajectories, because you are all individual people, will have different insights and experiences as well. So I'm excited that you will all have time to share. So our third caller that just joined is Dr. Mary Hendrickson.
Hi.
So I'm going to read your bio, and then you will have the floor to either add to that. Maybe you want to add some more background on who you are or your writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can read either your entire piece or just sections or from your piece. It's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to the crowd.
Yeah.
All right. Dr. Mary Hendrickson currently serves as the assistant professor in the Human Services / Pre-Counseling program at Moody Bible Institute. She also serves as an adjunct professor in both the graduate and undergraduate counseling psychology program at North Park, as well as an adjunct professor in the clinical and mental health counseling program at Moody Theological Seminary. Mary brings 5 years experience as a pastoral counselor and marriage and family therapist in Southern California and Brooklyn, New York. She recently completed her doctoral work in pastoral community counseling, where she explored the effects of colorism and social pressure on African-American female co-eds. Dr. Hendrickson's passion is for providing quality mental health services to underserved urban populations, and has research interests in race, psychology, and neuropsychology / neuro counseling. All right, so we have a lot of expertise in the room.
I'm still learning.
So the mic is now yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and that needs to be updated because I'm actually serving right now in Chicago. So I'm not in Brooklyn any longer. So we're in Illinois together. Thank you so much for having me, you guys. The conversation I've been listening as I've been trying to get on. So I thank you so much because it's been so fruitful. And I love hearing from all of you guys in terms of your experiences as well. So the piece that I wrote, if I can give a little background on the piece that I wrote, the students at Moody, there's a very small minority, or a very small group of African-American students, and they noticed for, obviously it's more salient when you're Black, but then on top of that, they noticed so much of the different hierarchy in terms of their shade. And that brought it, they came to me, of course, being one of the only few Black faculty members there. And it just struck something in me that was dormant for a while. I'm one of 3 girls, and I'm the darkest skin out of the 3. And my older sister is very, very light skinned. And I heard some of you guys' stories, and I was called Blackie, Black Toothpick. All of you guys, all of the names, right? All of the things that, that we all had to go through in terms of being dark skinned, and it hurt deep. I tell people all the time, racism, it makes me angry, but it hurts when it's from my own people. That hit really deep. And so it was so dormant for so long. And my mother was so great, where she was just like, "You're my chocolate baby." But it didn't work, because for me, it was you spend so much time outside, right? So much time outdoors, and you spend so much time with your peers. And at a certain age, you talk about psychology, the most formative age is age 10 up until age 12. So during that time, a lot can happen. If you're spending most of your time out with your peers, whatever happens at home, whatever happens outside can supersede what happens at home. So no matter what my mother was telling me, I wanted to fit in with my peers, and I didn't. And so I got teased quite a bit, and, all of the different things, and it scarred me for a very, very long time. And so for the kids to come to me at the school and say, they have a name for it, right? You were saying that before, right? They have a name now, it's colorism. But before, I didn't have that name in the 70s and the 80s, right? I'm 44. So the 70s and 80s, we didn't have a name. All I knew that they thought I was too Black and too nappy headed and all of these different things, right? So for me to, and I've been writing about colorism for a while and just being dark skinned, but I've never had the opportunity or even the courage, to be honest with you, because I feel like people conflate racism and colorism. And sometimes when you talk about colorism, a lot of African Americans will say, well, it doesn't matter because we have a bigger issue to address, right? And that is just, it minimizes everybody, it minimizes our experiences, right? And so I thank you so much, Sarah, for even providing this platform for us to kind of take away. I always say that colorism is like the branch from the tree of racism. for allowing us to kind of highlight this branch, right? So thank you so much. But I'll read a little bit of the poem that I wrote, and it's coming from a specific, because I teach at Bible Institute. So one of the students said, you know what, we talk about colorism, we're talking about colorism, but how does God see dark-skinned women, dark-skinned people? Like specifically, not just us as Christians or us as, children of God, but how does he see us as dark? And I always tell people, I was like, he didn't accidentally spill a bowl of chocolate when he was making me. He was intentional, right? And so one of the students asked me to write something for her piece, for her it's kind of like her end of the year thesis. And she wanted me to write a piece coming from a biblical standpoint, or coming from a standpoint of how God looks at dark-skinned individuals, because there's so much that we kind of overlook. And when we talk about how we were formed and how we were made, we kind of look at it in a sense of just in a general sense, but not that we were intentionally made with our beautiful skin color. We were intentionally made with our beautiful hair. So it's called My Masterpiece, and it's coming from the voice of what I believe that what God has said in terms of how we are as dark-skinned individuals. So it says, "Dear daughter, come out of hiding, for you are dark and comely. Your handcrafted sun-kissed skin bears no sin, freshly dipped with intention. I've made no mention of mistaken identity. Whether black as a kettle or a deep brown Hershey's kiss, you are a radiant reflection of thee. For I, your God, created the light and the darkness, and neither is more kin to me. Dear daughter of Ham, pick up your garment. Betray and rejection shall no longer be projected onto your perfected complexion. For the sight of your hue is not a result of shameful drunkenness. I will replenish what the locust ate and shine my light on your brethren's willful unconsciousness. Dear brethren, release yourself from the plantation. I have called all to join me at the table. She owns no cotton gin, so rise from the divisive lies, myths, and fables. Remove those haughty eyes, for her body no longer toils in the field. She builds her confidence in my unapologetic workmanship, pigmentation uncompromised, knitted together flawlessly. Look on to her fairly, my fair daughter, for her melanin carries the beauty of me."
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's about some beautiful poetry today, which is really exciting.
Thank you.
So I want to return to some Q&A now. And I want my viewers to pose some questions so that I don't, monopolize the conversation. But I have plenty. I have plenty of questions. And I am excited. Well, I just want to say I'm really excited to be able to talk about colorism with people, because as many of you stated, people aren't always willing to talk about it, right? And so we kind of like have these things on the side of our head, and like no one wants to have this conversation with me. So I work on colorism a lot, and sometimes it gets kind of lonely. You're like doing the research, you're doing the writing. It's like, I want to be in conversation with other like-minded individuals. Yeah. So today is really special for me. So thank y'all for giving me that opportunity to talk about it with other people who get it. And I don't have to like explain myself to you all, because you get it. But there might be people watching who get it a lot. And so I want to keep digging into this issue of colorism in terms of raising awareness and that sort of thing. So my question at this point is thinking about the fact that everyone on this call identifies or may identify or presents as female or woman. And for every year of the contest that I've been keeping track of the genders of who submit, it's been about an 80-20 split in terms of male-female, people who identify male-female. And there are some non-binary people who have submitted too throughout the years. But for people who identify as one or the other gender, it's about an 80-20 split, 80% female and 20% male. So I'm wondering, in your experience or in your research or in your reading or in conversations with other people, how does gender identity impact someone's experience of colorism, or how has it impacted your particular experience of colorism? So yeah, I'll leave it at that and then follow up as needed.
I have
It's a lot, I
know. I'll hop in just because this question actually comes up a lot for me because it comes up. Okay, I'll say it this way. So I'll preface by saying my partner is like the opposite skin tone of me. He does identify as Black, but he's very light skinned. And growing up, you know, I feel like colorism has impacted my preference in terms of like who I dated or who I thought was attractive. And I definitely feel like for a long time, I was afraid to date someone darker or, you know, with a similar complexion of me because, oh no, dark babies and, you know, what's going to happen in the world. And obviously my opinions of that has changed. But God would have it that my future husband would be light skinned. But what that has done in terms of my research is that it has brought a different perspective to my work because he's had his own situations with colorism growing up in New York. And I'm so grateful that Dr. Henderson is here because your background is really rooted in a lot of my own research. I'm a very conceptual artist. And when I went to graduate school, one of my priorities was I need to take a psych class. I need to know, like, this is so much deeper, you know, than, this just runs really deep. So I took this class called The Psychology of the African American. And that is actually where the term colorism was formally introduced to me. And we would talk about, you know, people of color having, light-skinned people in particular, you know, they have their own issues as well, having to validate their Blackness. People assuming that they're not Black, you know, depending on what their features are. And I never could relate to that, obviously, because of the color of my skin. But being with my partner really opened my eyes to that. And especially him being a male, because I'm like, well, how did you deal with this? You know, you weren't going home and crying to your mom, right? As like maybe a lot of women did growing up. And for him, it was just frustrating. But I think men just have a very different way of dealing with those stressors. I also think that men form relationships very differently and friendships very differently than women do. And perhaps that impacts why, you know, you have that 80-20 split, perhaps. But I think in my research, I've gotten feedback from both sides, from both men and women. I think that women are more likely to necessarily come forward. And for men, it takes a little bit, you know, for them to kind of understand, you know, like, you know, I actually do have a lot of experience with colorism. But, you know, for, you know, if I was to ask my partner, his first response would have been like, you know, I never thought about that. You know, he had those experiences. And when asked the question, he's got a lot to say. And he's got a lot to share of his own struggles that are very different but similar to mine. So I think it just comes down to like how they've processed.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think men look at it a little bit differently, like she's saying. I think they sort of equated, especially in the workplace, equated more to racism as opposed to colorism. Men have a whole different point of view as far as how they look at this. Even in my profession, you know, with men of color that get jobs, generally it's the lighter one that's more, you know, get that job at the top. I just think white America is more susceptible to say, you know what, I can deal with someone that's lighter as opposed to someone that's darker, because I go through the same thing myself. But dealing with it, looking at it from a male perspective, I see them as taking it and viewing it a lot differently than we as women do. They don't see it as all the time as being colorism. It's more like a racism type thing for them.
Yeah, I would jump in and say the same thing as Bobby and Christina said as well, is that sometimes, especially as our place in society as Black men and Black women, Black men will see it as racism because they are usually the main ones on the, when you talk about police brutality and all of that, they're usually on that end. So they'll see it at a bigger scale and a more global scale. And African-American women, Black women will say, we have this intersectionality of being a woman, being Black, and being dark skinned on top of that. So ours tend to be a little bit more intersectional in terms of how we look at things, because we're getting that pointed out to us, I believe, far more than our counterparts. However, they're being seen as a Black man at a bigger scale, if that makes sense.
Yes.
We're constantly being looked at every little facet of our intersectionality of our being. So that is going to be the most salient to us,
Yes.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of the processing, but I also I see the way that we are responded to and the way that we kind of function in the world that makes a difference between our male and our, between male and female males in terms of colorism.
Yes.
So the question of gender and colorism has been something I've been exploring. So done some video interviews with Black men in terms of getting their perspective either on colorism as an issue, but also their individual experiences with it. And one thing that I always ask them about is the inverse of the stereotype. So a lot of times dark skin, and we think of celebrities, right? Especially some male rappers who have said they don't date dark skinned women, even though they themselves are very, very dark skinned. And a lot of times the argument is that dark skinned women have bad attitudes, or they're too rough, or they're too masculine, or they're too manly, or too ratchet or ghetto. But that same stereotype applied to a man is less of a negative thing, right? So a man who is or rough or rugged is actually seen as a positive. And I always point to casting in films. And I ask people who are watching, also just the general public, to think about how often when you are seeing African American or Black of any ethnicity, Black couple, how often the woman is darker than the man, right? And how often the woman is lighter than the man, right? And you will find that it's extremely rare for the woman to be the darker skinned person in the pairing. There are a lot of very dark skinned men who are celebrated as sex symbols. As Idris Elba just got,
sexiest man of the year.
He's extremely dark skinned. You think about going all the way back to Wesley Snipes and just Black men throughout the history of popular media, and you don't see that same sort of celebration of dark skinned women in terms of like being love interest or being beautiful in that way. So I think gender plays into it too, because if the stereotype is that dark skin is masculine and light skin is more feminine and more classy, then being a woman, that is actually a detriment to you. Whereas if you're a man, then you're cool with being seen as masculine. However, when it comes to things like police brutality, right, or racial profiling, or getting a job, then all of a sudden being seen as like this super hyper masculine, tough, rugged, Black, dark-skinned man is not always an advantage, right? Because then you might be seen as more criminal, or you might be seen as less intelligent. And I know there are several of you who are actively doing research on this, but there have been studies done throughout the years that show the correlation between people's perceptions of intelligence and skin tone and that sort of thing. So even though Black men, dark-skinned Black men sort of benefit from that masculine stereotype associated with dark skin, they also still have negative associations in terms of intelligence, right, or their competence on the job market and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think to some extent too, is that there is, and I know a lot of people don't like this word because like I look when I'm on the blogs and stuff, they're like, oh my gosh, but the internalization of that, we internalize that, right? So it's not just white Hollywood doing that, we're doing that to our own people as well, right? So we've seen all the, the light skin Aunt Viv replacing the dark skin Aunt Viv, the light skin, all of a sudden replacing the dark skin sibling, right? And so we see that, and there is this internalization, but I think, I'm so glad we're talking about this because it's a lot to unpack, right? There's these dualities in that where it's just like we we continue to, I think, look at each other and blame one another of the privileges that one has over the other. But in reality, there's this duality in that. Sometimes dark-skinned women may get a job because they're just a woman in general, but then sometimes dark-skinned men may get the job because they are a dark-skinned man and they're being sexualized, right? And, like you said, that masculinity piece, right? Grace Jones was considered to be, to a lot of people not to be attractive because she had those androgynous features, so it's so much to unpack because we get mixed messages of what is beautiful and we get mixed messages of what is acceptable, and we've internalized that, I believe, from society.
We have.
Yeah, I think colorism amongst people of color is often more blatant. So white people can express colorism as well, but they usually don't. So the more you know someone, the better able you are to push their buttons, right? So amongst African Americans, for example, but other ethnicities too, like we know that this skin hierarchy is a thing, right? White people have it implicitly, but it's not part of their conscious the way it is for people of color. So people of color will be more blunt and more vindictive sometimes in making that apparent. And I think about, as you were saying, a lot of the media that I'm talking about is Black created media, that perpetuates a lot of these stereotypes. And sometimes it's more apparent in Black media because in a white movie, you might only get one Black person. So you see the difference, right? But in a Black film, when you have lots of Black people of different colors, it's more obvious. Coming to America, for example, is one of my favorite examples of colorism, where you have like the very fair-skinned, almost racially ambiguous sister, right, who ends up marrying the prince. Yeah. And her, much darker-skinned sister is left to settle with the guy her sister rejected. I think that's so telling. I want to ask you all about what you think, and because we also want to focus on our agency, right, as people who care about this issue and spreading awareness and helping people to move past their biases or to move past their wounds if they've been negatively impacted by colorism. So in your opinion or in your experience, what would you say is one of the biggest obstacles for addressing colorism? So what's one of the biggest obstacles or some of the bigger obstacles for making change in this area?
I would say that it's the biggest obstacles that I've encountered, to be honest with you, is the idea that it's real. A lot of people do not believe it.
Seeing is believing.
Right.
Yes. That is very true.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree upon that one.
Yeah. And I think I said earlier, like I said, oftentimes when I talk to individuals, they will see racism, which it is the bigger issue. But because it's the bigger issue, it's kind of like nobody has time for that. We are all Black and people in everybody else's eyes, right? And so it will be looked at as a small type of, it'll be minimized because we're supposed to worry about the bigger issue, which in reality, that is part of the bigger issue. So even just having people believe that, yes, I experienced a whole different type of life because I compared to my lighter skinned counterparts, I just have. And right. And we'll look on TV and it's blatant to us, it's magnified, but a lot of individuals will say that it's not real or that we need to get over it or all of these different things and then that cuts even deeper, right? And so that's why it's so closed off, that we're so closed off about it and don't want to talk about it because I don't believe that people actually think it's a thing,
right?
In our community.
And that's why awareness is key, right? Because people don't know it to be true or believe it, by having these conversations more and just even bringing up more examples like snaps to your Instagram, Sarah, because I just feel like whenever there's a moment on like television or in the movies, like you're on it, calling it out and like bringing it to the forefront and keeping it relevant and keeping it fresh. But I think that's important because that's how we're able to talk about it. It's hard for people to advocate for something that they're not able to experience themselves, or it's hard to advocate for something if you don't have any examples of sharing it for yourself, it's hard to believe it. I think the biggest thing is that as a community, we're so excited to be represented, period. Right.
Right.
Some people want to just be like, man, just be grateful. At least, there's
Yeah.
a sister
Right.
or a brother. Right. But of all the situations that one token brother or sister just so happens to be light skinned, it's just like, ugh. And it's like, I don't mean to hate, but how many other people could have fit this role? Or was this an opportunity where you could have combated colorism, by putting, someone of a darker skin tone there instead? I like to, in my own thesis paper, as of course I had to do, when I talk about colorism, I reflect on how growing up for me, visuals of myself was hard. And right now, to be a toddler or like a young child, we've got lots of examples, right? However, though we have lots of examples of minorities, which is great, this is where colorism is highlighted, because for darker skin little girls and little boys, they're still having trouble, especially for little girls, they're still having trouble finding spaces and seeing themselves. Doc McStuffins on Disney is a person of color, right? But she's light skinned, and like there's all these examples where we're seeing that. We're seeing the curly hair, thank you, Moana. We're seeing all these great examples, right? But Tiana, I mean, it's just, there's always going to be more to be done. But it's all awareness based. It's all awareness based.
Yeah.
And I feel that we, as that example, that person in front of them, we have to do more. Create that dialogue, those moments you just talked about. When there's a teachable moment, there's a moment you can grab. You gotta grab it, because I grab it even if I get in trouble. I'm going to grab that moment in my classroom, and I see a pretty little black girl walk in with that curly hair that she took that weave out, and tell her she's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my life. So you got to grab those moments. You got to make them feel good about themselves. So we have to just, as our own people, we've got to do more. We can't look to others and say, you know what, they should have, could have, would have, whatever. I look at people that I work with, and I feel they could do more. People I've worked with throughout the years. But when I come upon a teachable moment, a moment that I can make a difference, I'm going to do that. Because I feel like I have a duty and obligation in this life. As a God-fearing woman, that I have to do that when I have that opportunity.
Absolutely. And I will grab onto that. I do. And thank you for saying that, because that is the key, right? And I do the same thing. I will take pictures of girls at the mall and tell them I'm gonna post it on Facebook. I do. I love it. And I have a daughter, and she's very light skinned. And my daughter is it's so important with that as well for me. That my daughter, because she's light skinned, I want her to be aware of the differences, and not, even though she may get, I always tell her this, you may get the better end of the stick when people are talking about your skin color, but I need you not to see that as a compliment, because that reflects self-hate, right? So it's not just, when I see dark skin and cute little chocolate girls, me coming at them and telling them we're beautiful, I'm also using that opportunity to talk to a light-skinned girls too and say, listen, you're beautiful as well. God made you it was not an accident as well, but I need you to know what's a compliment and what is being ignorant, right? And so kind of having that and taking those opportunities when they're young, right? Have those opportunities when they're young, because then they can grasp that, where they can say, okay, so my daughter, she has a beautiful little chocolate best friend, and she always tells her, she was like, Mom, I always tell her skin is so pretty, her skin is so beautiful. And that makes my heart just melt. It's not just her. I don't want her to feel like she's on this good end of the stick where actually
Right.
it's a negative. It's a thing that actually is hurtful. It's a thing that came from hate, you know? So yeah, I agree with you guys. Taking that opportunity.
Gotta affirm each other.
Yes.
Yes.
I think, so I completely agree with all of you saying that denial is one of the biggest and one of the initial hurdles to addressing colorism. Especially back in 2013 when I first started blogging. Like now, you know, Oprah's talked about it, Gabrielle, like celebrities are talking about it now, you know, even light-skinned celebrities are talking about colorism being a thing. And so people kind of, you know, keep their disbelief quiet to themselves a lot more. But back then people are like, y'all just making this up. You know, you just want a reason to be mad. Right. And because, you know, I am dark skinned, I was also just jealous or just hating, right? This is a thing. But I also like I wrote a blog post, and you know, Dr. Hendrickson, as you mentioned, your daughter, it makes me think about this sentiment that I've expressed before, that colorism does affect light-skinned people too. It does affect light-skinned girls.
Yes.
So I wrote about that, and some people say that, you know, the definition of colorism is discrimination against darker-skinned people and that sort of thing. But I feel like because we are a community, right? Because your ethnic group or your racial group or even just your country, right? Across all races, right? Anytime some of us suffer, right? It makes the health of the overall community at risk, right? It puts us all at risk if there's a segment of our family or a segment of our neighborhood that is suffering, that is being ostracized or alienated, right? And I talked too about, like you were saying, when light-skinned girls are made to feel like they're beautiful because they're light-skinned, I think, you know, you're a psychologist, you can speak to this too. I think that's sort of a skewed understanding of what makes you beautiful, right? And so, yes, you know, acknowledge that you're beautiful. You know, it's not just dark-skinned girls who are beautiful, like we're all beautiful. But for the light-skinned girls who think they're pretty because they're light-skinned,
Right.
to me, like that's a skewed understanding of it. And then also, if a guy or other people have to compliment you by putting others down, right? So not only will guys say something like, I only date light-skinned girls, but they'll say, I only date light-skinned girls because dark-skinned girls are too ratchet or too ghetto, right? And so, like, you shouldn't have to tear someone else down to pay me a compliment, right? And so as light-skinned girls, like your daughter, it is good to see that, you know, yes, I'm beautiful, but you can't diss my sisters too, right? Because that's not doing anything for me. You know, we're not in competition with each other, especially as women, where we're expected to compete. We're expected to be pitted against one another. So I'm happy to see, like, your example, you know, with your daughter, and, you know, how you help her with her consciousness. And, like, even as Dr. Hendrickson was saying, like, all of these things are teachable moments, right? Regardless of what color the person is in the room, we can always increase awareness, increase consciousness about colorism, whatever angle you are coming at it with. So it makes me happy to hear all these things.
Absolutely. And it has to do with, and you know, it's so funny. I love that you said that, because I think we have to go to a core of what our identity is, right? Because that's why we're pitting ourselves against one another, because we've been stripped of our identity for so many years, right? And so that's the way that we're able to fit in white America, is to try to fit into this hierarchy. But I told my daughter, you know, and that's what we have to do with our Black kids, right? Is say, okay, this is where your identity lies. It doesn't lie in the skin tone. It doesn't lie in these other things. Now, it's it's a part of who you are. I tell my daughter that all the time. It's a part of who you are, because again, I said God he didn't do it by accident. He didn't just accidentally drop some, you know, some cinnamon or some, you know, some cream on you and you came out the color you came out. It was on purpose, but that's not where your identity lies. So I think kind of redefining that identity piece in people, in these kids, will help them not see that the shade of their skin is actually how they are supposed to see themselves in comparison to other people, right? It's that character.
Right. Yeah, it's a defective self-perception if you think you're less than someone, but it's also defective if you think you're better than someone.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think too, when I'm trying to communicate with my light-skinned sisters, I always use the perspective of me being tall and thin, right? And so just because I'm tall and thin doesn't mean that my life has been easy or I've never been teased or never made fun of. But I would be a hypocrite to act like
Right.
my body type is not the most represented in culture, right? Like my body type is not more likely to be on a magazine cover than my sisters who are rounder, right? And so I think when we talk about skin tone, I think it's fair to say that as a light-skinned woman, you can acknowledge that you are represented more so than your other sisters. And I don't think that's anything wrong with that. Because we all have some form of privilege, right? It could be being cisgender, it could be heterosexual, it could be male privilege, you could have class education privilege, right? All these types of privileges. And so your skin tone in a racist society, a light skin tone is going to afford you more privileges. And I think once we acknowledge that, then we can say, okay, but how can I mitigate that? Or how might I leverage my privilege, right? How can I say, hold up, let me hold the door open for somebody else who they tried to shut out, So I think there are ways for us to continue to come together and that sort of thing.
I love that you use that example, because I use the same example in terms of like when I always say my thicker sisters, I always say that, where it's just like it's so important that, that I do know, I got teased for being thin in the Black community, but in the bigger scheme of things, it is a thing that has been looked upon as more beautiful. And that means that it's my duty to be able to advocate for people who are that are thicker, that aren't seen as more beautiful. So you are so right, where it's like, it's okay that we can actually extend ourselves in a way that we know that we can actually be of help to our brothers and sisters, even if it doesn't take away from us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that if you get a part in a movie that you didn't deserve that part in the movie, right?
Right.
If you become a supermodel or you become president of the United States, that you didn't work hard for it and that you don't deserve to be there. Right. But colorism, just like racism, just like sexism, just like homophobia, what that means is someone who was equally qualified, and in some cases, a person who was more qualified did not get that opportunity because of how they look, right? So that's what we're saying. It's not that you can't act, but you just got the role just because you're light skinned. No, you got chops, right? You have skills. You are beautiful, right? Like you are good for this position. But people with equal skill, equal talent, equal experience, and sometimes a little bit more, we're not given that opportunity. We're not even considered or looked at with the same level of fairness.
Yeah.
So I have other questions. I think our live audience is a little shy today, so they're not throwing out any questions. But do you all have other comments that have come up in what we've already said before I launch into other questions?
Good.
Okay. So I want to go back to this idea. We talked about one of the obstacles being denial, people's denial that colorism exists. In my mind, I'm thinking there are some other obstacles, maybe even something that is below the surface of that denial in some cases, which is fear, right? Or
envy.
A level of complicitness, right? So maybe you deny it because on some level you don't want to be made to feel guilty, and sometimes I've talked to people and I know that they have actively engaged in colorism, like not just, oh, I accidentally said something, or they have actively engaged in colorism, right? And so it's no surprise to me then that they say, oh, that you're just making that up, it's just a preference or whatever. So I'm wondering if you see other obstacles to colorism, and then thinking about, other obstacles to addressing colorism, or even just talking about it. And then I want us to kind of brainstorm or, try to come up with some ways that we can respond when people deny it outright, or say you're just being jealous, or you're just making it up, and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. I will say, Sarah, I think you hit it on the head where you said, when we talk about like the psyche, we talk about denial being, the crux of denial is fear. right? The crux of denial is fear. And oftentimes when we talk about that, if we were to compare that like with racism, oftentimes people don't want to admit that they're racist because they feel like that means then they have participated in something, or that means something about them, or that means something that they can't handle, right? So if we use that same idea and we talk about colorism and we go below the surface and talk about fear and colorism, yeah, then most people are afraid to, denial comes out of being fearful of something that they may face that might reflect them, right? That might reflect them. So oftentimes people will be in denial about it because they don't want to see that they maybe have participated in that, right? Or they don't want to see that maybe they've been blind to it for that long, right? We would like to believe that we are actually, especially as Black Americans, that we're all woke, right? Right? But when you talk about colorism, it actually takes off that Band-Aid. And what it says is, I've been participating in internalized racism. And Black people do not want to admit that they have been participating in a piece of racism, right? And that's the core of that, right? And so they would rather say it doesn't exist because they're like, no, I'm not white, so I'm not racist. But oftentimes when you get below the psyche, that's what it is saying, I actually participated in something that my oppressors actually started.
Right. Nobody wants to be wrong or to be called out for that. And I'm so glad Sarah mentioned the concept of privilege earlier and how that ties in. Because I think the same thing can be said for that as well. When we acknowledge our privileges, whatever that may be, we actually have the opportunity to broaden our horizons. But I think that's hard. I think it's a hard thing for anyone on this planet to do, is to acknowledge and recognize all of their privileges, whether it be gender or racial or, skin tonal. Our privileges really affect that. I mean, you have to be able to humble yourself. Like, I can humble myself and admit to say that, yes, I have perpetuated colorism before. I didn't want to have dark-skinned babies, and I wasn't, I was purposely looking at only looking at white guys or light-skinned guys, and wanting to change myself for all of those reasons. But I'm able to recognize that and correct that behavior and my actions that I do going forward. And when I see that and when I identify people doing that, I'm able to address that and address it head on. I've got 2 nephews who are mixed race. And I think about that all the time, like the conversations I'll have with them when they're old enough, for them to recognize the privilege that people may give to them or may not give to them. And kind of going back to what you said about for people who have lighter skin, if someone's complimenting you or finding you beautiful only because you have light skin, is that really a compliment? And to just acknowledge that anytime, you're being put on a pedestal, who is being pushed into the shadows because of that statement or because of that particular action. And to acknowledge the fact that you may be privileged because you have lighter skin, or you may be privileged because you are more educated. You have to think about the other end of those people, the people on the other side of that.
I think a lot of it comes from, as we talked about earlier, that deep-rooted hurt that we had at one point. And that hurt, we don't want to confront it. We don't want to deal with it. So we suppress it. We don't want to say that we were a victim of someone calling us this, and this. So we push it aside. We don't want to deal with it. But I think at some point, and in my life, at my age now, I'm dealing with it more as I write my book. There are things that I'm pulling out as I'm writing through my character that I realized I truly didn't know that was really embedded so deeply in me. And now that I write, and it's like, oh my God, I didn't realize all of this was going on at this point in my life. But I think we have to get beyond the shame. We have to get beyond the hurt. And then we can deal with things that have been so suppressed in us from that slave-like mentality from a long time ago that we never truly dealt with. And it's been passed on generation to generation. So at some point in time, we have to sit and actually just say, I'm going to deal with this. And like Stephanie said, then I can change it. I can change the way I deal with people. And when I see these things transpiring in my presence, I can do something to stop it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Bobby, I'm so excited you brought that up. The shame. So there's this fear that that we have talked about just now, where someone who perpetuated colorism or someone who might have some privileges because of colorism doesn't want to face those things. But I know a lot of dark-skinned people, dark male and female, who also are in denial that this is a thing. And I think Bobby hit it on the head, is that it's painful and it's hurtful, and there's some shame to that. And I think so much about the imperative to be strong. Oh, just suck it up. Like, oh, who cares what those people said, right? And this facade that we have to put up, especially as, Black folks, that nothing is bothers us. Like, the hashtag like unbothered, right? So it's cool to be callous and to not care and to act like nothing affects you. Oh, I don't care about anything, like nothing. I'm impervious, right, to everything. And so I think when people do hurt, it's like, well, I can't admit that hurt my feelings. I can't admit that.
Right, you're unbothered.
I once felt ashamed of my skin tone, because on social media, people are like, oh, I've always loved my skin. And I'm like, okay, well, good for you. But there are a lot of people who did struggle, right? Even if it was to struggle to love their skin, or struggle to realize that other people didn't love your skin, right? So sometimes you come from a loving and supportive home, and so you don't realize that the outside world does not appreciate you for who you are until you get there and you're like, oh, what you mean you don't like my hair? Like, what do you mean you don't like my skin? So it's okay if that hurts, because humanity, like that's what humanity is. And to the extent that you can feel joy and happiness and these so-called good emotions, like you are also opening yourself up to possibly feel the so-called negative emotions too. So I think we should embrace all of our humanity, and there's definitely fear on both ends, right? Like either you are afraid to acknowledge that you have perpetuated colorism, or you're afraid to acknowledge that you have been a victim of colorism, and a lot of times those things overlap, right? So hurt people, right? Like Stephanie's alluding to, a lot of dark-skinned women will then, reject other dark-skinned people or other dark-skinned suitors, right? And like, no, I can't have no Black babies, right?
Right.
It becomes a vicious cycle. And I do agree. That's why I called my blog back in 2013, Colorism Healing. Because I really believe, and still do, that if we don't address our own stuff, we're going to continue to spread our germs everywhere else, right? So if I still have these biases, if I still have this shame, then I'm going to like treat other people poorly, or I'm going to continue to create problems in my community. So I'll allow others of you to comment, but I also want to dig into what Bob was saying about the process of writing, right? Because, I'm a writing geek. I acknowledged that at the beginning. But what was the process like for you all in terms of writing about colorism? So Bobby kind of talked about it helps her discover like some hidden things. And I think Dr. Hendrickson mentioned that too. Like as you were writing and talking with your students, you realized that you had pushed some stuff to the back of your mind. So writing that made it all fresh for you again. And I'll say this and then allow you all to come back in. I also wrote my dissertation on colorism, and I was writing, there was this day when I was writing, and this memory just like came suddenly. I had not thought about this moment for like decades, but writing my dissertation about colorism, I had this memory of a babysitter who who gave me like a lot of food and wouldn't let me drink any juice or anything until I had eaten everything on my plate. But the light-skinned girl she would sit across the table from me, and she would get to drink her juice, no matter how little or how much she had eaten. And that memory just came back to me, and I just started crying, just in my living room, writing my dissertation. It was so sudden that I actually started laughing. I actually was like crying, but then laughing because it was so visceral. So there's definitely something I think about writing, and that is part of the healing process that I am going for with the work that I do. But what was it like for you all writing about colorism in particular? Or what can writing offer other people?
I think writing brings us full circle. It's interesting to look back at old pieces I had written that wasn't necessarily about colorism, but just were about my own experiences. For a class in graduate school, I remember having to mix like new pieces with old pieces. And I'm going back to these pieces that I had written in high school, whether I was angry or sad. And I was just like, man, I had a lot going on. But I feel like it's been I see myself like I've come full circle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can humble myself and see my mistakes. I can see things that I wrote and I was just like, whoa, why did I say that?
Mm-hmm.
Or what does this mean? And not what does it mean for who I might have put down, but also what does it mean for how I felt about myself and my own self-esteem. And I feel like that was just a hurdle on its own to go over. And continuing to write, just, you know, like you were saying, that memory that came to you, it brings up old, deep rooted thoughts, you know, experiences that happened. And it's almost like your brain didn't know what to do with it. So it just put it in a filing cabinet. And writing opens up all these cabinets. And in my brain, I just feel like all these moments and various points in time are just flying around in my head. And they're being pieced together as I write and as I just kind of synthesize my own experience and understand them for myself, and then to prepare them to share them to other people through writing. So I'm grateful to writing for that, because I think that that's very unique. I shared earlier before that a lot of my artist statements have become poems or some type of creative writing forms than like your generic standard artist statement. I would get choked up with having to write one of those. But if I looked at the work I was making and I thought about why I made it, it was so much easier for me to write creative pieces about them. So I was like, you know what? Let's just let this be the way. So poetry has always been a way for me I get my thoughts together that way.
I was going to say what Stephanie said too. When I teach a counseling, one of my classes that I teach is counseling skills. And oftentimes a lot of my students, what they want to do is just, they're so eager to want to know what skills they can use to help the person and make sure that they intercede and make sure that every skill that they use is the perfect skill to get them to think. And and oftentimes I have to stop them and say, sometimes people just come because they want to verbally vomit. Sometimes that's healing. That's cathartic in itself, right? Yeah. Most of the things that most counselors do, we don't do. We journey with you, right? And so in the scope of writing, that's the same type of concept where sometimes it feels good to get it just out, right? Just to vomit all of those things that you were thinking and all of those things you just want to get out on paper. And then you can kind of start with the help of other people getting those pieces together. But for me, that's what it was, where I was just able, because it wasn't my subconscious, where I just, you know, the way that especially Black women in America, oftentimes we're like, we got it, you know, we're strong Black women, right? We buy into that stereotype. And so what do? We push everything back so that we can cope and so that we can kind of go on. But then it emerges some other in a different way. Right. And so for me, I had to make sure when I started writing, I had to sit there, like you said, Sarah, that you cried. I cried because I realized how much I stuffed just so I can move on and just kind of go out throughout the world and not be mad at everyone. So I kind of had it in my subconscious, like, you know, I'm good. I know this exists, but I'm okay. But writing helped me just to rip that Band-Aid off and get all that junk out and just look at that vomit, you know, and look at that. and that is healing in itself. That really is healing in itself.
I like that word, vomit. I like that expression. I have to agree with you on that. When I started writing this what I'm writing now in my book, it's so therapeutic. I mean, all the emotions, all the things like Sarah was just saying, things I thought about as a child that I just had suppressed. Some of the things that was said to me that hurt. And it came to me just like it had just been said just then, you know, and it was years ago. And you sit and you're like, my God, how could someone say those words to you? You cry, but you deal with it and then you move on. So in my classrooms, what I have my children to do, and sometimes it's really hard to get Black boys to write. I start out with a journal. And I always tell my students, you don't have to write about happy, joy all the time, because your life is not that all the time, every day, all the time. So journal your life into a book. And they will write all day long if I let them do that. They love to journal their life, you know. And I get pleasure in watching them just write their feelings down. Just write what you feel. I feel good today. I feel bad today, or whatever. Writing is such a therapeutic method to get through those days that maybe this isn't going right, or I'm having a good day. So writing for me has just been, and I've loved it all my life. But like I said, this is my first published piece, which is just motivated me to just keep going and going and going. But it's therapy for me. Other than digging in my garden and planting flowers and vegetables, I love to write. It's just such, it is an indescribable feeling. And I love it.
Yes, as a writing teacher, my day, I'm gonna have to like replay this to my students. Like, see, like, therapeutic, you get so much out of it.
Yes.
And actually, too, we talked about this earlier in the live stream about like how sharing it publicly, right? So like reading, sometimes, you know, for people who maybe weren't comfortable writing, or who, you know, aren't interested, or who actually don't enjoy it, I find that they will read something and have a similar experience, right? So I think writing, do it. I love it too. But also reading other people's stories can help trigger other memories that you've had, right? So then maybe you read something that reminded you of that memory that you had suppressed too. So I think reading what others have written. And then too, thinking cross-culturally, one of the things that I love about the writing contest is that there are people from different cultures as well. So you do get to see like how the other half lives, right? Or the other 20% live, right? Because it's not divided in half. So we have a question from one of the viewers, and they're asking, so I'm going to read this to all of you, and then you can feel free to respond as you would like to. And it's kind of going back to something we touched on related to light-skinned African Americans in particular. It says, what would you all recommend for lighter African Americans to do to be allies in the fight against colorism? And this came from Jandel Crutchfield on YouTube. So I'll repeat it. She says, what would you all recommend for lighter African Americans to do to be allies in the fight against colorism?
I would start off by saying, first, listen to their stories, right? And really and believe them, right? Everybody has their anecdotal evidence. Everybody's not going to be able to pull up a PowerPoint presentation to tell you, you know, the background. So the actual believe their story, but also just as dark-skinned people, we were talking about earlier, how we take those opportunities. Have the courage to take the opportunity to talk to your light-skinned brothers and sisters too, in terms of what colorism means and how colorism has affected us as a people, right? So oftentimes light-skinned individuals, what I can definitely feel as if they understand colorism, but not necessarily have taken that step to talk to other light-skinned people about it, or feel courageous enough to talk to other light-skinned people about it. So just taking that step to be able to take those opportunities to say, hey, you know, and this is what's going on, and this is how it affects us as a whole, and it is a thing. So for example, I had a young lady, and you talk about different cultures. She's from India, and she actually did a piece on colorism as well at our school as well. And she was very, very light skinned. So she was doing it for her sister. Right? She was doing it for her sister because she saw what her sister had to endure. So to be to be that ally, and to be able to be courageous enough to say, you know what, I'm standing up for what this means and what is going to help us as a whole, as we were talking about earlier, Sarah, right? As a whole, and just kind of see that it's not this divisiveness, right? Anytime there was colonialism, there's colorism, right? So so we have to realize that we're going to combat the divisiveness, and to make sure that we're actually one and believe the stories of our sisters and brothers.
So other thoughts, maybe Bobby or Stephanie, if a light-skinned person wants to reach out and be an ally. And actually it's interesting because I've also gotten an email with a similar question from someone else in the past, a lighter-skinned person wanting to know what they can do to be an ally in the fight against colorism. So maybe you have a perspective on that, or maybe you have a situation where you wish a lighter-skinned person had acted differently in a certain situation. So you can even speak to it from that perspective as well.
I mean, I think Dr. Henderson just really summed it up really well. But I think it just goes back to just acknowledging, you know, being an ally is just understanding both perspectives. So like she was saying, hearing their story, but also acknowledge your privilege, and acknowledge your advantage. You know, if you don't want to look at it like privilege, you know, here's a synonym, advantage. You know, if that's easier, but just acknowledge that. And I also feel like just to have that dialogue back and forth is really helpful. Growing up, one of my best friends was light skinned, and I definitely grew up jealous. I grew up very envious, you know, when we would go out to parties and that kind of thing. She drew all the attention, you know, like together it was cool, but I knew like who was getting a number, or like, you know, like it was just obvious straight off, you know, right off the bat. But it wasn't until, you know, we had some deeper conversations when we were older that this whole time I was jealous of her light skin. She was jealous of mine. She wanted to be, you know, warmer and chocolatier. And, you know, so I also feel like that's another way to be an ally, just to share your stories. You know, colorism is not only one way. It is not just a Black community thing. I also feel like these conversations can be had with anyone else. I actually had a great workshop before, and I think a nice question to ask, just as another way of sharing colorism experiences and to start that healing process, is to think about, when was the first time you recognized a color difference? You know, when was the first time you recognized that as the individual, or when it was brought to your attention? And when I asked that, it was in kind of like a round robin type of environment. And to hear the people's responses were great, from Asian Americans, African Americans, Indian Americans. Everyone, you know, had moments where, you know, we're not born to like feel this, right? Like we understand it experientially. We're subtly indoctrined into this is better, that is better mindset. So someone puts it in you. Someone puts you in a situation where it's just like, oh, honey, you're too dark for that. Or, you know, oh, you're yellow, you know, like, or actually I have another artist friend. She's Korean, and her mother, she grew up with her mother saying that she must have had too much soy sauce when she was pregnant, because she came out darker than her other siblings. You know, so because it touches so many different people, I feel like as a lighter skinned person, no matter what ethnicity you are, just by having those conversations with each other and sharing those experiences is great. But when you can acknowledge your advantages, your privileges, you're able to correct those scenarios.
Yeah, very good.
Yes. I agree with both you guys. I think we have to take that dividing element off the table. We have to realize that we all cut from pretty much the same cloth. We have to come together under one umbrella and have that dialogue, discussions, and let it be heard from both sides. Just like you said, Doc, when you're looking at the fact that I'm getting this because I'm light skinned, then that shouldn't even be a thing in the conversation, because that too will pass, where it's not, you know, as prevalent as it needs to be in the situation. You need to realize that we gotta bring this together and stop separating our own people like we do. You know, America does that enough for separating us, period. So we really don't need to be at the end of this thing where we're separating each other based on our skin color. We have to bring this together, sit down, listen to each other, because listening to the conversation, I'm learning a lot myself as far as light-skinned people having that plight as well. I just always felt like, okay, they're light-skinned, they got it going on. You know, what are they complaining about? We as dark-skinned sisters has always been like, you know what, you get whatever the crumbs that come off the table later, so to speak. But they do have that plight as well, and we have to listen to that. We have to listen to everybody. We want to be better as a whole, as a group, as a culture, as a race. We got to listen to everybody in this picture and not just keep separating ourselves based on those standards and criteria, because it's not going to work.
I love that you said that, Bobby, because and Stephanie, my best friend, is light skinned as well. And one of the things that we do have to recognize, especially as dark skinned individuals who, you know, sometimes when you're so hurt, you only can see everything from a myopic view. Everything is just from our perspective, right? But growing up, what I would also see is the response to the colorism would be that the light-skinned girls would get beat up and they would be targeted because they were just simply for the fact that they were light-skinned. And so oftentimes when you have a conversation that I've experienced, when I have a conversation with a lighter-skinned person, they have their wall up as well because of the response to all of the colorism, what the dark-skinned girls did in response to their anger, in response to their hurt, in response to their pain.
Right.
That helped them develop, that made them develop this hurt and this pain. And that's where the divisiveness comes from. And so you hit it on the head, Bobby, where it's like, it's not just light-skinned girls need to listen to us and understand just what we're talking about in our story, but we also need to come to a point where we actually have to admit that we have done some, you know, as a whole, it's been both ways, you know, whether it was the chicken or the egg, at this point, we shouldn't even worry about that, you know,
Right.
But understanding that we believe both stories, right? And how we are both hurt, I think is the core and the center and the crux of that whole conversation, is just kind of helping uncover that pain and help each other heal through that.
Yeah. So I'm going to also add to that. And I just am so blown away by all the wisdom and insight, you know, coming from just 3, you know, individuals. So I think this is a real treat for the live viewers, but also anyone who comes across this YouTube video in the future. But I think so I'll start with what Dr. Hendrickson was just saying in terms of I guess a lot of times what ends up being animosity between lighter skinned girls and darker skinned girls. I think in order to respond to the question about as a light skinned person who wants to be an ally, I think kind of similar to what other people have been saying is to help people be aware of where that divisiveness is coming from, right? So a lot of times we will only get half of the story, right? So we'll say, oh, these dark-skinned people don't accept me, or these dark-skinned girls tease me or put gum in my hair, right? And so I think if you want to be a light-skinned ally, you know, sitting down with that lighter-skinned sister and saying, I acknowledge your pain, like I see your hurt, and nobody wants to be rejected for any reason, right? But that is a response, as Dr. Hendrickson was saying, to this larger social system of colorism, right? So even in that one instance, or like in that one school setting, for example, you might have gotten beaten up or teased by darker skinned Black women. Like, I want you to see what they're facing outside in the larger world, right? And so, yeah, I think if you want to be a light skinned sister who's an ally to the cause, helping other light-skinned women who are also hurting to understand the larger social system in which that hurt comes from, right? And so saying, you know why your dark-skinned classmates or the person who is ostracizing you is so hurt and so angry, or, you know, is because of, look at what she's dealing with, look what else she's dealing with in her life, right? So I think it's about empathy, and just developing empathy for each other, right? And so I do to say for my dark-skinned sisters too, like that's why we have to take control of our healing, you know, because I can easily see you holding that in and taking control of your healing, being willing to tell your story, because that's a lot of times where the healing begins, being able to admit that hurts you, right? So let's admit that it does hurt us when the light-skinned girl gets more attention, right? You know, as trivial as that seems, like, oh, why should it matter? Like, who's getting it? Like, we have to admit that hurts us, right? So that we, again, don't react in such a negative way. And then in terms of being a lighter skinned African American who wants to be an ally in the overall cause, I think helping all of us see the larger systemic issue. Because a lot of times we keep it at the interpersonal level,
Right.
like, oh, this one person did something to me, right? And I think we have to put that one individual interaction into the broader context in order to really promote healing, right? And as long as light-skinned people are denying their privilege, or as long as light-skinned people continue to have that wall up, then I think darker skinned women it's gonna continue to be hard to trust to go with our light-skinned sisters, right? And we can't heal as a community as long as half of our community is in denial about what's going on, you know? There was something else I was gonna say, but I can't remember it at the moment. But I do appreciate that question. A good question. Yeah. So we have another question here. It says about parenting. So the person asks, I'm parenting young children. Do you think parents need to explicitly address colorism with their kids, or rather just make it part of overall acceptance of others? So I think this is a really huge question because think about ending that generational cycle, right? So many times it does start with the parents' attitude, whether it be apathetic, like just not paying attention to it at all, or actively promoting colorism. A lot of times, like even going back to the Dark Girls documentary, where women were talking about how their own mothers would tell them, like, oh, you can't wear that because you're too dark, or I wish you had come out a little lighter like your other sisters, and that sort of thing. So what would you all say, either in your personal opinion, or your professional opinion, or your academic opinion? How can parents, or even anyone who has an influential role in a child's life, so even if you're not their biological parent, maybe you are a mentor or an aunt like I am, or an older sister or a teacher, right? What should we be doing in terms of young kids? Should it be an explicit conversation that we have as parents and adult role models? What do you all think on that?
Hello.
Hi. Welcome.
Thank you.
We just had someone ask a question about how parents should be talking or should not be talking to their children about colorism. So we're going to go ahead with that question, but then I'm going to come back to you and let you introduce you to the audience, and then let you read some of your work whenever you're ready. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
But again, the question was, as parents, should we be talking to our kids about colorism and about what to do? And I think Dr. Hendrickson already said what she does with her daughter too. So
yeah, I was gonna say, just, you know, I think some of it comes down to parenting styles. But for me, I am one of those people that I believe that God is very intentional. I guess your values, your parenting styles, and your views, right? So I believe that God is very intentional about our colors. And so what I think often happens is that when we say, oh, everyone's accepted, we kind of just give this blanket idea of what that looks like. And sometimes kids could then form their own view of what that means and allow the world to kind of form their view of what that means. So for me, with my daughter, I'm very specific, not just black versus white paradigm, but I'm very specific in terms of colorism, light-skinned all the way down to dark-skinned. Like or dark-skinned, she actually helps me with I taught a social and cultural diversity class. We did the brown paper bag test, and she actually helped me with the brown paper bags to understand what colorism is. So I'm very, very intentional about what that looks like and what that means, because I don't want her to seem as if it's a shameful thing. I think sometimes for me, when we make it like, oh, we just accept everyone, we kind of hide these beautiful facts about us and these beautiful intentionalities about us. And so for me, as a parent, I am very intentional about what that looks like. And I don't kind of take the colorblind theory with my daughter at all. So, I mean, and I think it just has to do with parenting styles. And I also believe that it has to, you know, so if you come from a psychological standpoint, it also has to do with the type of child you have and their age as well, but making it age appropriate, but having them understand that, there is this specific, God was so specific in making us, and it's such a beautiful thing. And let's talk about how and why.
Yeah.
Those are awesome points. Very, very awesome points. I think it has to start with the parents because there's so much out in the education, the world, and every place else that's incorrect. You are your child's best resource for understanding these things. When you look to the world to teach your children these things that you should be teaching them, my sons, I always was very transparent with them with everything. And it's a lot like you're saying, Dr. Henderson, there's that maturity level that comes with it.
Yeah.
You have to feed it to them when they're able to take it, to digest it. You can't just cram it down their throat and hope that they understand it. So I think the parent, from my perspective as a school teacher, you are the best resource. Don't let the school system, don't let others tell you what you feel is right for your child. And they should be introduced to these things, because if you don't, the world will introduce it to them. And it may not be in the correct way.
Yeah.
I think it's just so important to encourage kids to acknowledge the differences in skin tone. And when that's done like at home or with the parent, I think it's, you got to affirm your child no matter what it is that they are, dark skin or light skin or what have you. But just encouraging them to recognize it. Dr. Henderson, I'm glad you mentioned that about the colorblind theory, because I think a lot of parents struggle with that. Maybe they don't want their kid to see color, but it's so important to recognize that there are varying skin tones and differences, and just as different as people's personalities can be, is the same for skin tone. But what do you do with that information? You're not going to judge or divide based on that. It's important to embrace all of those shades, and love all of those shades, and know that there is no hierarchy. You're not better or worse for having any of these tones. And I also think that parents, I don't have kids myself, but I think coming from a Caribbean background, it was very common for my parents to say one thing, but their actions just do something else. And it's like, do what I say, not as I do. And that's not the case. I feel like parents need to be an example. And eventually when I am a mom, I hope to be that example. So I think that's also important too. So be aware of what it is that you're telling your child, and then watch your own actions and comments to make sure that you're upholding what it is that you're expecting from them.
You know what, Stephanie, and that's real. I would love to say that really fast. And it's kind of like when we take the idea of like, women and, when we want girls to grow up to appreciate their bodies, we as mothers want to make sure we don't say anything, that is negative towards our bodies. It's the same thing with color. So if my daughter saw, if I was talking negative about my skin tone, or I'm talking negative about somebody else's skin tone, or putting myself down and self-deprecating, she's going to look at that a certain way as well. So Stephanie, that is a great point in terms of how we talk to ourselves as well as parents.
Yes.
So I want to get to Kashish as soon as possible. I will add my little 2 cents to the parenting issue. It's my argument that because we live in a racist and a colorist world, if you do nothing, your children will likely be racist and colorist, because that is the environment, that is the conditioning, whether they're watching TV, whether they're hearing comments at school, they are more likely to be exposed to racist and colorist ideas. And so as a parent, you have to actively combat that. If you just do nothing, it's like drifting, right? The stream is headed towards racism and colorism, right? So if you're not actively paddling your children in the opposite direction, they're going to move along with the rest of the society to think that whiter is better, that thinner is better, right? And also, if you teach your children to share their toys, if you teach your children to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, if you teach your children not to hit their siblings, right? Then you should also teach them not to be racist. So you teach your children actively how to be productive, good citizens. And I think racism and colorism are just a part of that in general. So I am so excited that Kashish was able to join us. How are you doing?
I'm feeling great, thank you. How are you?
Yes. So I'm going to read your bio now, and you are free to add anything that you want to say that's not in your bio. You want to give us more backgrounds about who you are, where you're from, what you write, and that sort of thing. And then you can read some or all of what you wrote. It's up to you, depending on how you feel. So I'll go ahead and
Okay.
introduce all. So Kashish Lewis, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah,
Kashish?
that's right. That's right.
Okay.
Kashish Lewis.
Kashish Lewis is a passionate reader and dedicated writer on social media. I know because I follow you.
Thank you.
Her official Instagram mainly focuses on motivation and strongly urges humanity to prevail. She loves to listen, talk, and connect with people and aspires to write her own book soon. So you have the floor, you have the microphone to say and read as you please.
Yeah, well, I'm an Indian girl actually, and I belong to a middle class family in India. And the thing is that I've always been taught to follow what I love doing, and that's one reason that I got into writing because I think I was able to express myself even better. And when I came across this competition or this contest on colorism healing, and I was like, wow, this is something I should try because I know how it feels to live in a country that has, various kind of skin tones. And India is a country where you find even the lighter shades, the darker shades, and there are people from different backgrounds. So it actually really connected to me. This contest really connected to me, and this is one reason that I was looking forward to this contest. And yeah, I've been writing for around say 2 years now, and on social media I've been active since 1 year. And I've been doing my education currently I'm in my college where I've taken up arts. And so I'm quite passionate about my writing, and I really think I'm going to take this forward. And yeah, that's all about me. So yeah, I think I'll go ahead and read the piece I've submitted. I think I'm just going to read one paragraph, one stanza.
Okay.
Okay, so the title, I didn't give any specific title to it because it was quite abstract. But I'm just going to start reading it. Amongst the million hues, white, black, and brown few, had I ever wondered why an ism was added to color and the world stood by? If shades look lovely on an artist's palette, aren't we all lovely skin shades valid? Curly, straight, wavy, or kinky? Are we, I ask in shiny more wimpy? I may be one shade darker to look as pretty as one shade lighter, but my soul has no color, no difference in anyone whiter. Why, I ask, am I carved another? How, I ask, am I carved another? There's no racism anymore, I hear people say. Then why is there colorism in drama and play? Why are we assured fair and lovely? On screen, everything lighter. Are we considered dark and ugly?
Mm.
So yeah, one of the stanzas of the entire poem I submitted. And I really think that people should participate and get into such kind of contests because I would say inspiring, because I think the future generation also needs this. And knowing and accepting yourself in your color is something that's really important. And from a country where I come from, I think there should be like a lot more participation, because I've seen people like one of you said, they say something and they do something else. And this has been happening in my country as well. And people are like okay because they just want to keep up with the social world, and they're posting stuff like I'm okay with people who dark shades, and they show their support towards them. But when it comes to real life, I don't think people accept the dark shades the way they are, because they're like always like, oh, you might have looked better with those lighter shades. Or even considering even the fact that a lot of people, I've seen a lot of apps as well that promote, I mean, that are actually against this kind of stuff. and they're quite racist, and they also don't realize that they are not making any change in the country, because they promote lightening up your skin tone, or making it or smoothing it down, or even for the normal people. And in my country where I come from, and people who talk to me and they say, oh no, you look beautiful, but when it comes to accepting who I am, they always tend to hesitate. So I really know how that feels, and but my parents have been really supportive about it. They've never told me, or they've never asked me. See, I mean, they've never given me the slightest hint that a darker shade does not look pretty. And yeah, so I think this motive should spread wider, and it should bring in more people, and it should motivate more people to write some stuff that way. It also expresses how much of a change we can bring into the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for reading that piece. I think it was perfect timing and summarized so much of what we've been talking about so far, and so much about what the contest goal or the mission is. Um, Yay! So I want to ask you, since so I've been talking to the other three ladies for a long time, and I am glad that you're able to join us. So I want to give you the chance to respond to some of the questions that we've had before. But I think specifically because you intentionally included social media in your bio, and because I have interacted with you on social media, what do you think is the role of social media, not just movies and television, but things like Instagram and Twitter and Facebook? Do you see those as hurting, as like spreading more hatred towards dark skin, or can we as people use it to kind of spread love for darker skin and for all skin tones? And specifically, how are you using it maybe to make that kind of change in the world?
Yeah, well, I would say that it works both ways, because when it comes to social media, I've seen a lot of pages that promote colorism and a lot of people against it as well. And I have seen a lot of say fitness pages, or you can even consider these model pages. They have these lighter skin tones as their models only, and even when I go through their feed, I'm like, I don't find any dark skin tone. So I think yes, in some way social media also affects, and it also has this power that against colorism. But I think there are a lot many platforms like colorism healing as well, who are promoting having and accepting having darker skin tones. So yeah, I would say both. And me personally, I think I've been into posting stories, or say even posting some of my on my writer page as well. I have tried and written a lot on colorism, and I have tried making sure that none of my pieces are related to just one kind of people or one kind of background. So me personally, I've also tried, being a part of platforms like Colorism Healing and some other platforms as well that promote having darker skin tones. And there are a few platforms and profiles that have these dark skin tones as their models, and they look lovely. They actually look lovely. So I would say it works both ways, and it depends on how we use it and how we look at the world and what kind of changes we want to make, because we are the people that we see, we learn, we watch, and we become that way. I believe that. So yeah, that's basically it. There is also a lot of things on Instagram that I've seen. Majority of the people, if you say, they're quite insecure about themselves, say about their looks, they're insecure about their skin tone, they're insecure about the way they dress, and that the insecurity is something that leads you to using other kind of media to smoothen your faces or get your skin shade lighter or something that way. So yeah, and also I think it kind of creates some kind of pressure social media creates some kind of pressure on you because you see a lot of other people looking pretty, and you start to consider that your dark skin tone isn't really very beautiful. And when you see those other kind of other skin tones posting pictures of themselves, it kind of makes you insecure, is what I believe. But I think we should not let that happen to us. We should not let the other platforms or profiles put us down, or make us think that we are not beautiful. So I think it also creates, it's because of that pressure. A lot of people tend to get carried away by that pressure, and they start to start getting insecure about themselves. So yeah, I just think we need to be careful, and we need to spread such kind of things, and we need to talk about this more. So the more we talk about it, I think the more people will start accepting themselves. And if we're just gonna keep quiet about it and not have such stuff, and just let it happen, then I don't think it'll work. It'll ever work. So yeah, I'm happy that we are all here speaking about it today, and it kind of makes me so happy about it. I'm so satisfied, and it just gives me so much pleasure to be here with you all in this platform.
Oh, same, same. I completely agree with that. So I don't know how active the others of you are on social media. I know Stephanie talked about being on Instagram a lot. So if you all have thoughts too about Instagram, how you use it, not just Instagram, social media in general, how it contributes to colorism, but how it might also contribute to raising awareness about colorism, or how it might contribute to representation, right? Thinking about representation of, women with darker skin tones or men with darker skin tones.
Sorry, I just didn't get the last line. You cut off there. Can you repeat it? Can you repeat that again?
Yes. So I was saying how social media might contribute to increased representation for people with darker skin tones.
Yeah, well, talking about that, for the fact that we all have such contests, like I'm saying, this kind of promotes it. But a few other social media platforms, like you can say YouTube, for example, or you can say any other website for that matter. I mean, they have a lot of things. I mean, there is so much power in the internet that you can make a change anyway. Like, you can just start a moment, and if you get enough attention and if you get enough popularity, it goes viral. Let's say, if let's take for example the Me Too movement, and that was so viral. I mean, just one hashtag brought out so many stories of women being sexually harassed. So yes, I think the social media is quite strong, and we should keep using social media. Like, we should introduce some kind of websites like you have. And also, there are people talking on YouTube about the same thing. There are people, a lot of people who are on YouTube, representing this, and they're talking themselves out. They're sharing their stories about how they felt. And also, there are advertisements and about, that are against colorism. There are so many skin tone changers, I would say, and there's so many creams. There's so many. There's, as I said, it's all about the pressure. Say, be it any platform, not just Instagram, be it any platform. There's a lot of pressure to look beautiful, and social media, in the sense, if you consider YouTube, like I'm saying, we can actually use this platform like how we are today. We can keep using this forward and spread that we all need to accept how we are, the skin tone we have. And there should be more people coming out and talking on YouTube, or making their channels share their story, or we should invite more people to our channels and ask them to share what they feel, and what background they come from. And yeah, so that's about it.
Thank you.
And I would also add, I mean, is it Kershish?
Kashish.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, Kashish.
I think it's so great that you're here because it does, like you said, in terms of not just this conversation, but social media, it shows that it's not impervious to the US, right? It permeates throughout cultures, right? Or even the subcultures in the US that sometimes
Right.
oftentimes when things come up, we can often believe that it's just within our own group so we can brush it off, but understanding that it is a bigger issue that affects a whole, like I said earlier, if there was colonialism, which there is, there's colorism, and the fact that we're able to see that it's not just one specific culture, and you know, and that it's just their problem, but it's a big problem overall, and where it comes from, right? So social media representation matters. So just seeing those images in itself can be uplifting, can be encouraging, but it also provides an avenue that we can actually teach and educate as well. And so to be able to see all these different cultures and all these different cultures with the same core issue can solidify our argument that it is real.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And also, I really agree on the fact that social media is actually very global, and we need to start, actually realizing the fact that we are living in a world that is actually really diverse and not just generalize on one country or one background. And like I said before, the pressure about being beautiful or being having a lighter skin tone is because of the world being so diverse, that we have been taught from our childhood, or we've been watching just the lighter skin tones, that we've considered ourselves out of the box, and not actually out of the box, out of the line, I would say. And we need to start considering out of the box instead of saying that we are somewhat different from others. And yeah, I think that's I really agree to that point that you said, and I'm happy you said that.
Social media has been really influential in a lot of the work that I do. And also, when I'm looking for more examples, I know, Sarah, you've commented before on some of my posts from when I'm traveling. Every time I travel, like, colorism always comes back to the forefront. And like Kashish was saying, we are so diverse, and every single country on this globe has someone of varying shades on the spectrum. You know it. And however, that's not what's necessarily profitable. And we live in a society that is still profiting from and perpetuating any stereotype that is closer to whiteness, or that is closer to any ideal of whiteness. So I would say social media, it's kind of going both ways. It's hurtful, but it's helpful. It's helpful to give voices to people like us and other people's stories. But I can't say that those voices are necessarily loud enough at this point in time, because when you go to Google, if I type in beautiful bride, I'm going to have to go real deep before I see anyone of color. Before I see someone of myself, I'm going to have to type in Black in front, or African American in front. So even search engines as a whole, like outside of social media, we have a long way to go. I love to travel. And if I'm looking at resort ads, or I'm in the airport, I'm looking at travel ads, I'm sitting on the plane and they're advertising a casino or something, it's only people of those lighter shades, whether I'm in China or Thailand or even going to Ghana. It's people of lighter shades that they're showcasing. And what are they saying to other people? That only people with lighter skin tones can enjoy, or have the money, or have the opportunity to be beautiful, to model, to travel. All of those things are influencing. So like I said, it's helpful but hurtful. There's all these great movements. Black girls love to travel, Black travel. There's so much opportunity, I feel, with social media. So I can't dismiss it at all, because it has been helpful, because people share what they can relate to.
So we are nearing the end of our scheduled time, and I want to respect everyone's time. I'm more than happy to go over time, but I don't want to keep any of you here past 6 o'clock since that was the designated time. So I want to give a few announcements, and then I'm going to leave the opportunity for you to make any closing remarks or any final statements or any goodbyes or thoughts and that sort of thing. So again, I want to remind people who are watching now, as well as people who are participating, that this is the first of 2 live streams. So the next live stream will be the same time, same place on Sunday, November 18th. We'll be joined by hopefully 8 additional writers. And then one other thing I want to mention is that I do have an upcoming event in February. So I'm not doing a writing contest in 2019. So this might be a very special group here if they are the last group. But I am doing an art exhibit. And Stephanie, I need to talk to you actually. I'm doing an art exhibit on colorism at the University of North Carolina in Wilmington. So be on the lookout for like a call for artists and that sort of thing. And just also if you're in that area of the country during the event. So it'll be February 28th through April 5th. So think about those dates coming up. Yeah, so that's what I want to say. Also, if you haven't gotten, this is my proof copy. That's why it has this like not for sale gray stripe across the top. But every one of the beautiful, talented, intelligent people you've heard speak today are featured in this volume 2 of the book. So if you want to support their work, the work of dozens of other writers who were not able to join the show today, do that. And so with that, we have about 10 minutes left. And I want to give you all the opportunity to wrap up and speak whatever truth you still have left to speak, if you do have words left.
So I'll just chime in first. I'm so more educated tonight. Beautiful panel of ladies. I've enjoyed conversating with all of you, absorbing your knowledge into mine. This has been an awesome opportunity for me. Professionally, personally, I just want to thank you for the privilege and the opportunity of letting me be able to be a part of all of this. Yeah. Thank you, ladies, for being a part and letting me be a part of your lives tonight.
I'll just chime in afterwards. Oh, go ahead, Stephanie.
Oh, no, go for it. I was just saying, great. Thank you, Bobby.
I'll just ride on your coattails where first of all, Sarah, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this and help me continue to heal and help all of us continue to heal. Again, I thought I had it, covered, and I had it dug deep down enough where it wouldn't reemerge, and it did. So, but I do believe that it's reemerging for a reason. And I thank all of you ladies for being so brave. Come on the panel and just talk about it. And again, like Bobby said, just your expertise, just your own personal stories have blessed me tremendously in this phone call. It really has. So I thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Sarah. This has been great. I don't even have words for it. I just have feel good emotions and feelings, and I'm sure I'll write about it later and send it to you. But this has been great. On the vein of social media, there's so many tags and spaces that are talking about colorism, and I just encourage anyone watching this, follow Colorism Healing, follow the authors. Like I said, I've been making art surrounding the themes of colorism for the past 2 years. My Instagram's @createdbrown because we're all created brown. Like that. And my last name is Brown, so a couple in one. So I'm just grateful for this opportunity and to be published in such a powerful piece of writing, whether it be the last one or the second to last one or what have you. And I'm excited to continue following this journey with colorism healing and just being a part of anything it is that you have to offer. I'm here for it.
Absolutely.
Same.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have been a part of this, and I really want to thank you again for giving me this opportunity to actually participate and be on the call. And it's so lovely to meet such wonderful ladies as well, and who actually have the same thoughts. And it's good to know that you know the dark skin shades are being given the same privilege and what they deserve, and they've been given a place with what they actually are worth it. So yeah, I really thank you for this movement, and I really hope you keep doing this and you come up with a lot more things that support colorism, and I'd be more than happy to be a part of every little venture you're gonna have. And yeah, I would also say that this has really motivated me, and it's kind of inspired me to accept myself and also spread this across you know, my friends and the community that I live in, because I think it's really needed in the place I live. And it's actually 5:30 in the morning for me,
Oh,
and
I was gonna
it's
ask,
such
what
a good
time
start
is
to the day.
it?
Yeah, and it's kind of such a beautiful start to my day today, and I'm really happy I did this in the morning. So so yeah, that's it. And that's all I had to say. And yeah, I'm gonna, as Stephanie said, even I'm gonna write something for you, because I really am out of words to say how much this is gonna help me.
Yes.
And I really wish colorism healing all the luck to keep growing and keep spreading this movement all throughout and help people realize that everyone is beautiful. So thank you everybody for even your knowledge, because everyone has each one of you actually has motivated me today here.
Mm. Yeah.
So I'm not gonna cry on live YouTube, okay? Y'all are, so I could ditto everything. So I'm so appreciative of each of you for taking time out of your day, out of your schedules. Some of you, it's 12 hours in the future. It's like time travel. We're talking with someone in the future. It's what, November 17th already, where you are. But
Yeah,
just
it's
like,
Saturday here.
because you could have been anywhere doing anything. And also to our viewers, the people who tuned in, even if you couldn't watch the entire broadcast, the fact that you tuned in for this like really important discussion, and for these really unique, special souls, right? So we're doing it for the cause of colorism, but I also want to do this for you as individuals. Because I do want to encourage you. I do want to show appreciation for you. And it means a lot to me that this means something to you, right? So I really do see it as a service, right? This is like, I don't, you know, I want people to buy the book, but it's not like a multi-million-dollar venture here, you know, by any means. Like, this is sponsored to you by yours truly. Like, but just having this community. And so for people watching and for you as well, like, this will be available on YouTube afterwards. I'm going to put your, if you sent me links to your websites or your social media profiles, I'm going to put this in the description of this particular video so that anyone who watches can like just open up the about section and see your Instagram handles or that. But then also on the page on colorismhealing.com where the book is for sale, I link to the different authors' websites or social media profiles if they have chosen to do so. So I hope we can all continue to follow each other through whatever channels are available for us, and that anyone who watches this video can also reach out to you if they feel so inspired. People who read the book, they might have a particular connection with your work. I hope this is not the last time we'll be in touch. Since we're both in Illinois, Mary, if I'm in Chicago, we're gonna have to get coffee or something.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm gonna close out by saying thank you to everyone. I feel like thank you is inadequate, you know, really. But the words I have at the moment, because words are hard. I know as a writer. They don't and I hope to see everyone on Sunday.
Yes.
Same time, same place.
Yes.
Love y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.